On this episode of ITAV, where AR and VR belong in the AV industry, how video over the network will impact the AV and IT networks, what is blockchain, and how does it impact AV? All that and more next on ITAV.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ITAV, episode 15, recorded Friday, February 23rd, 2018. Dot Matrix Days.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Uteligy.
This is the ITAV show, the monthly look at how well AV and IT kind of fit together. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to talk about all things IT and AV. First up and foremost, his name is Paul Zealy, and he comes to us by way of Harman by Samsung.
Something like that. It's fine. It changes on a day-to-day basis. Hello, Tim. How are you?
I am well, sir. I am well. Also with us is my buddy from up north. His name is Brad Colt. How are you, sir?
I am snowed in, so calling from the home office today.
Brad's in Minnesota, in case you were wondering. He's in, snow is no secret there. So finally, my buddy and pal, his name is Michael Drainer, and he's both an AV and an IT pro. How are you, sir?
Doing very well. And by the way, I miss Minnesota. I love the snow.
You don't have to shovel.
This is accurate. He does not.
This is true.
All right. First story here comes to us actually from our friends over at AV Network. Brian Meisner wrote a piece about the impending impact, easy for me to say, of the AR and VR in the AV market. Brad, I want to start with you on this as a consultant. Where do you see both AR and VR coming into this space?
Well, the virtual reality, I think, being a bit more of an immersive technology, I don't know that I see a lot of applications for what we're going to be doing in a lot of our meeting collaboration, but the augmented reality really excites me, and I've written about this before, as that opportunity to be a screen replacement potentially. And the tools like Zoom, will help enable that interoperability so that everybody is able to join a single platform, but you can go ahead and arrange the room however you want to. So I look forward to days when we might be able to re-architect our conference rooms, and Samsung might not be selling the display anymore. They might be selling you the glasses.
They already sell glasses, Brad. So
yeah.
You can, well, and that's the thing is, so do you see it where, is it like all or nothing, where you see AR supplanting and we don't install, or you don't, spec out projectors or displays, period?
As a long-term future, I could certainly see it going that way. Okay. If everyone's to have a BYOD device, then you don't have to be maintaining any of the hardware on the walls. It seems to make sense, but you got to look at where we're at right now. And it's still in sort of the dot matrix days, isn't it? You've got the Google Glass
matrix.
To take a look at that Intel glasses that they have. It's really just a small little heads-up display with something that's about like a digital watch. It's not very advanced yet.
Or Google Glass, that one.
What?
Google Glass.
What's that?
We all try and forget about that one.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Drainer, where do you see AR and VR?
Not here.
Okay.
It's novel concepts, and it's cool. And I do see a future where VR, especially in virtual exploration and in industrial gas and oil, geological things like that, where we can implement VR technology to help people move through the discovery process, right? Help geologists do what they do. And there's already people doing this type of thing with traditional projection, but I could see that going on to the next level, becoming much more affordable and attainable as we go down that road. But I'm with Brad on this one, that it's really VR is not going to be mainstream for quite some time. AR is definitely something that we could see in the coming decade in the conference space, but by large, it's not something that we're going to see mainstream for quite a while.
All right. Mr. Zealy, you'll have the last word on this. Where does AR and VR belong in the AV industry?
Right there alongside your drones.
Oh, well, hang on for a second. He actually that might actually be a positive statement. I want you to clarify that.
So the AV industry is a big tent. The part of the AV industry that I live in, which is the unified communications meeting operations, I don't see a huge amount of application for this. On the other hand, in the related areas of visualization and outside applications, there's a lot of applicability for this. So augmented reality is something that's fantastic. So if I have a legitimate AV application for a drone, and it's AV because I need to distribute it, record it, use the information for something, the augmented reality of location and metadata overlay that allows me to manipulate it and understand what those images are is hugely useful. On the other hand, if you say, how am I going to put VR and AR into a conference room that makes it a compelling, better experience for the users of that conference room and what they're trying to do, I'm going to, in all honesty, really struggle to come up with a compelling use case. And it's going to be something where I've got a solution looking for a problem. So I think tying into the same big tent where drones do fit into the broader AV, because there's reasons to gather video and some other things, that it's hugely promising. It just doesn't necessarily fit into the parts of AV that I practice.
Okay, and that's a fair statement. So,
Tim, what if we step outside the conference room and think about it as a service tool,
Right.
where you're going to send your junior techs out into the field with the AR glasses on?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
They're they're able to see and transmit that back to those really experienced guys. I like that as an application.
Or even more importantly, I'm looking at it and it puts an arrow as to which screw I'm supposed to undo to make that case fall apart, rather than try to juggle a book or look on my laptop and go back and forth. It guides me through that sort of thing. Absolutely. That is a huge process. And, AV, think of it even more importantly for a surgeon or an aircraft mechanic, where it goes through and they're starting to button it up and it starts putting a big red blinky about the switch they didn't set back in that jet engine before they put the cover on. I mean, that sort of thing is hugely positive. It's just, how does that affect the AV market?
When I'm looking at it as a tool for distributed, a tool for distributed mentorship, where now you've got some senior technician who's sitting back in the shop, able to see through the eyes of the 15, 20 folks they've got out in the field and able to walk them through what they're working on. So they're the ones who are able to start pointing that arrow at, this is the screw you need to turn.
So is that really AV? Or because we're really talking about where Paul's going, there is a lot of big data, right? So it's a lot of analytics, and Sir Watson is going to be looking through that lens via the technician to provide the info that's required. I get it, and it makes a lot of sense. And I could see an AV application specifically for the integrator, but I could see that across all industries and not something that's specific to AV necessarily.
Yeah. Absolutely, but I think AV could be a beneficiary.
Yeah, certainly.
All right, let's move along to the network. Coming to us from Amsterdam, and this is the link we're using is from Business Insider. Netgear introduces a 96-port modular 10 gig switch to quote unquote take the complexity out of AV over IP deployments. Netgear is a member of the SDVOE Alliance. SDVOE is a underwriter of AVNation. Paul, I want to start with you on this, and Paul works for Harman, who's also an underwriter. Whether it's SDVOE or it's SVSI or it's somebody else's solution, how is this move to not just 1080p and HD video, but also 4K and beyond? How is this going to impact the networks and this consolidation of networks where, AV folks that used to deploy their own private networks are now starting to put, all of the stuff on the same exact IT network and letting the IT departments manage everything. How is this going to impact that?
So let me start by saying that this particular announcement is very important to SDVOE. And the reason is that the nature of how video transmission works using multicast, allowing you a one-to-many, anytime that you're using more than half the bandwidth on a link, and in SDVOE, they're using 8 to 9 gigabits of that bandwidth. In order to switch, I have to stop receiving, and then I can bring in the next video stream. I can't say send that to me when it's all stable, then I'll switch over. So in order to do that effectively and not take potentially seconds, they have to use what's called an IGMP fast leave, which makes it immediately drop the stream so they can bring in the next one. The problem with an IGMP fast leave is as soon as you're using the layer 3 or network portions of your IGMP and your multicast, that fast leave forces all links to drop. If you are using
real quickly, all links from the transmitter, or all links to the receiver?
All links of that stream. So if I had 4 devices that were listening to that stream,
yes,
and I send an IGMP fast leave, and I'm actually using IGMP in my multicast, that kills that all the way to the switch, and everything goes away.
So all 4 receivers lose that.
But the caveat is in IGMP snooping, it's only link local. So the reality is that I need to be able to put everything in one switch. Meaning if I need to scale, I need a switch with a lot of ports in it. This is why Evertz came out with that ridiculous 1,000-port switch, because it allows them to scale, and they have a market that will pay for it, but allows them to scale. So this 96-port switch starts to say, I can now compete with SDVOE against some very big HDMI, HD-based matrix switches, and allow this to happen. Because as soon as I start to expand to multiple switch chassis and switch backplanes, they're not kidding about take complexity out. That is an incredibly nuanced network design that is exactly mapped to the application that you're trying to get at in order to make it work. So the best thing to do is throw a big switch at it and it all magically works, as opposed to saying, all right, this is the exact use case it works under with this way, and we're going to take care of the control plane. So it's really important. And that's the same thing if I have a gigabit switch and an SVSI that's using 800 megabits, exact same issue as it moves on. So ultimately, what we're going to see is these switching backplanes that are really going to start to allow you to replace the big HDMI backplanes. And that's where they're coming in with this, because this actually makes SDVOE viable in a fairly large matrix switching capability where a 24-port might not have.
Okay. All right, Michael, same kind of question. How has this moved to higher and higher, resolutions with, let's be frank, an uncompressed, 4K signal is 18-ish gigs, right? So, even SDVOE, and they say this in documentation, they cut out some what they call unnecessary information, get it to around 10 or 11 gigs, and then they do some slight compression to get it under the I believe they're saying 9 gig a signal. How are moves to higher resolution and everybody and their brother coming out with a video over IP solution? how are all these transmissions of video over the network going to impact both the IT and the AV networks?
Drastically. I mean, that's why this switch was developed, right? So that you have a specific built device to handle those issues, because the typical corporate LAN can't support that. And Paul's exactly right when he talks about the complexity involved. I mean, we stay very busy deploying complex networks, such as he described, across multiple chassis, building 40 gig backbones to support this type of technology. And you know, when you start dealing with the multicast issues, it can get very daunting very fast. So for us as a service provider, this actually becomes a little bit of an issue, because there's not as much need for our services when you're deploying this type of switch. And that's really good for the AV integrator. What this does, though, is it doesn't really progress the corporate side of the LAN so much, but it does keep some segregation involved there, as this device is going to make that much easier to deploy solutions for the typical integrator. So I think it's a very positive thing in that regard. And it does bring a level of simplicity that's very much needed in the space.
Well, really quickly, because one of the things that in talking with Justin Kennington from SDVOE Alliance, one of their selling points and one of their marketing tools is that they're claiming that as Fortune 500 companies are refreshing their switches, is they're putting in 10 gig switches. Mm-hmm. So does that not lend itself to more robust networks and give them the ability to put more on there, or not?
It does, but you still run into the inherent limitations of the protocols at play. Okay. Right. I mean, just as Paul said, when you're doing multicast, there are some very specific issues in being able to fast switch between sources, and those problems haven't been solved yet. To be able to scale greatly without very high levels of complexity, even in a 10 gig backbone. It's not so much the bandwidth that's the issue; it's the way that the protocols themselves transverse the network that are the problem. And that's why putting everything on a single switch fabric makes this very viable. So I actually took this message and sent it to an integration friend of mine that does a lot of video distribution. They use SVSI, they use some SDVOE devices, a lot of Crestron NVX. And he was excited about this prospect, but still, when you're dealing with a large corporate building and you might have 8, 10, 12 floors, that still becomes an issue, because you just simply can't run copper those distances. So he's kind of waiting for that next iteration, right? What's the next protocol? How are we going to do this on greater scale? And that's where the next generation of this is going to get a little more exciting.
All right, Brian, you'll have the last word on this as a consultant and somebody who designs these systems. What are some of the challenges and stuff that you're running into when putting video over the network?
Well, if we're working with the IT department, I'm looking at this as a HP switch, and I'm asking myself, is this for the AV integrator, or is this supposed to be something that's multi-mode and is going to be working for converging IT and AV? Yeah. And if it is, we need to have more people who are going to be coming on board making these sort of products, so that people who are Cisco houses are able to have a product offering. We're not going to be able to come in with the AV solutions and start to try and say, we need to shove this into your Cisco environment. That's just not going to work. It's not going to be something that they can support. So I generally liked this as a pretty good cost point for being able to replace a large matrix switch, but the way that it's going to fit into the IT world, if it's something they're going to to administer, I don't necessarily see that yet. And I look forward to what the evolution of this is. It seems like a good stepping stone on the roadmap, sort of like what Michael's alluding to.
I don't know many Cisco admins that are going to let a Netgear piece in their environment to begin with. So, even with this robustness.
Real quickly, let me ask you, actually all three of you this, and any of you can answer this. Does that then lend itself more credence then to SVSI and Crestron NVX? Because, and you guys can correct me on this if I'm wrong, you have SDVOE, which requires a specialized switch, right? If nothing else, it requires a 10 gig switch. You have AVB, which requires an Avenue Alliance switch. There has to be special sauce inside the switch that allows the passage of AVB signals. But SVSI and NVX does not require specialized switches. Am I correct in that?
Yeah. I would say SDVOE doesn't, other than
it has to be a 10 gig.
Right.
Yeah, it has to be a 10 gig. Right.
the issue that really starts to happen, depending on how you want to scale switch video across the network, is that networks are designed around structured cable paths of risers and layer distribution, and video distribution doesn't necessarily follow those structured cable paths well. And so how am I going to do this in such a way? Using less bandwidth gives you a better chance of fitting into those structured cable paths. But ultimately, with compression, you spend two things and get one thing back. So you get compression, and you're either spending money or time, because
and quality, just for the record.
But it's computationally expensive. So say for a given quality, it's either computationally very expensive or is taking a lot of latency. That's why you see H.264 versus like a JPEG 2000. Mm-hmm. H.264 is not as computationally expensive. You can do it for a low cost, but to get those levels of compression, you're incurring a lot of latency. And so you've always got sets of trade-offs. SDVOE has said that the trade-off is going to be money, and we're not going to spend latency, and we're not going to spend a lot of money, so we're not going to use a lot of compression. So we're going to go in another way. Now, all that then depends on where you want to go, because I would argue that SDVOE and 10 gigabits is not necessarily a great technology for campus-wide video. It's a great technology for replacing a HDMI or HD-based switch within a room, where you're getting the same functional parameters over the same cabling infrastructure as you would have with HD-based T, but you have advantages like smaller size, potentially, I don't know where the cost layout, but say let's lower cost, and asymmetry. But it doesn't necessarily make sense to have that leave the room.
But before you go down that road, though, HD-based T currently in its current iteration is still point to point. Yes, you can. There are HD-based T switches, and you can send one stream in and get multiple out, and you can do different matrixing. They still do not have a network, an actual, honest to goodness network. But when you're getting back to the fact that customers really don't care how things go, mm-hmm. Nobody cares whether I have a matrix switch sending it to 20 point to points or it's going through a network. Okay.
And from an application standpoint, it makes no difference. The question is, what do I get out of it? One of the things I could potentially get out of it is if I have a need for a 94 by 2, now that I've got this big thing, that's easy to do with SDVOE, ridiculously expensive and hard to do with HD-based T.
Or with a traditional, video matrix switcher.
Well, HD-based T being a traditional video matrix switch.
Well, and I'm also comparing it to, AMX's switching and HDMI switching, mm-hmm. and Crestron's, switching. And honestly, right. Both of you guys, both AMX and Crestron, use that exact example, right? You guys have iterations of 8 by 8, 16 by 16s, 128s by 128s, which are incredibly expensive when you get up into the higher numbers. And honestly, a lot of folks, including yourselves, you market these network-based transports as a cost-saving measure as well as an ease of deployment measure.
Oh, there are absolutely trade-offs within everything.
Yeah.
And there are reasons to go to the SDVOE. But one of the places where SDVOE breaks down is if I want to distribute that all over my campus. Now I'm adding a level of complexity and technology and
because
effort
of the 10 gig
to
switches.
that because of the 10 gig switches.
Just because of the raw bandwidth. Yeah.
Because of the raw bandwidth and the way that buildings are wired that goes in there. So
Well, you hit a point of diminishing
Yeah.
return with it. I mean,
yeah,
yes, the SDVOE video looks spectacular, but I mean, you make a point. The end user, what is that expectation? And
Right.
do I need that very low compression and very low latency distributed across a campus LAN? And I contend that in both
do not.
situations, you don't.
Well, hang on. This will be kind of the last one of this. There
Yeah.
are all these video transports. There are use cases for all of them. I honestly believe.
Mhm.
Certainly.
And there are. I've written about this, and we're actually getting ready to do some shootouts here at AVNation where we're showing the different types and what each one gives. If you want, if you want to put it on the network, let's start with that. And you want some granularity and you want fine detail. You're going to lose that with some of these, and you're going to gain that with others, right? If you want full motion video, there are different ways to go. So
SDI.
I'm just gonna. Did you just say SDI? All right,
Hey.
moving on from Spice Work. No, from
A
Spi- I'm not
75
gonna-
ohm coax is
I am
really
not gonna
easy
give
to
him the
terminate.
time of day.
And you can run it a long way.
Yeah.
From spiceworks.com. What is blockchain? Michael, I'm going to start with you on this. This is my question. If you're not familiar with Spiceworks, it's a great IT community that also they ask a lot of AV questions and how it impacts the IT network. So get yourself on there and sign yourself up. I have no affiliation with them. I just think it's a cool resource. What is blockchain, Michael? And the second part of that question is how can we use it, or should we worry about it in the AV industry?
What is blockchain?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, just go do a Google search. You'll find plenty of resources telling you about blockchain technology, but think about it as, and the article actually sums it up very nicely. Think about it as a journal or a register with anonymity for transactions. That's really what it is. And it's distributed across a network of many PCs, many computers around the globe to authenticate transactions. So how to utilize that in the AV world, it's not something I've spent a lot of time thinking about yet. And when I read this morning, I started kind of pondering it a little bit and trying to think about ways that AV could be benefited by utilizing blockchain technology. And I don't know that I have an answer on that.
Okay.
Paul and Brad, you guys run into some different applications, right, that are a little bit unique. In the world that I play in, I don't necessarily see it just yet, but maybe they're there and I just haven't recognized it.
All right, Brad, question is what is blockchain and how do we make use of it, or should we even worry about it?
Yeah, I would agree it's not there yet, but I see some potential, and it may not be AV specific, but as we look at the convergence with IT, and Paul can go ahead and dispute me on this, we were talking about a little bit before the show.
Oh, he will.
That, it has the potential to be a communications security layer where you're distributing all these transactions. And if you look at any communication as just a transaction, now we're able to say, yes, that was me who was making that transaction. You're able to go back and audit this log that's distributed and secure. And so, I see more for the IoT as there being potential there for it to be able to help authenticate and distribute the truth.
Yeah, but that's not insignificant as more and more IoT devices get put on not just the network, but also integrated into AV systems. So.
That's right.
All right, Mr. Zealy, last word here.
I too have been kind of struggling with how it fits well into AV. What blockchain does really well is provide a provenance, a known history for a piece of information, either through chain of custody or to be able to prove what changes have been made. So ultimately the question is, what types of things in AV do we need these history changes in? Similar technologies that we've done things with that become important is, so blockchain is based on a hash, which is just a mathematical algorithm that for any given input always has the same output, and a small change makes a very changed output. So we use hashes on things like software to prove that nobody changes software before you install it, signing code. We also have integrators who will take hashes of their code running in a touch panel, for instance, so they can prove that the owner's idiot brother-in-law changed it and broke it, and it's not their fault. So when you're starting to look at these administrative things and identity or being able to do things like pass control, there's some interesting things you can do, but I don't think they're fundamental into a lot of that AV stuff. I think the place that we'll see it happen is around streaming, because there's some work around using blockchain to be able to pass trust as to who can view a video and get a hold of a key. And so there's some techniques that are being used that are coming open source.
Don't tell the DRM police that.
Yeah, well, but these are in cases. So for instance, in NATO, there's ways that I can say, okay, here's the streaming video, and France, you can hand it to India or England without me having to deal with it. It's all based on blockchain. And so that becomes a sort of thing on saying, all right, I can pass around who has rights to it and add onto these things.
But see, stuff like that is incredibly important, because when you start dealing with, the DoD and you start dealing with Energy Department, you can stop. You can start doing, actual secure communication and track that, because
Right.
Paul, you and I both know, and you've been involved in more of these than I have, but I've done enough installations with the Air Force and the Marines that have required us to do separate, completely separate systems, and program the control system to say, when I want a secure line, I want a secure video conference, I've got to drop everything. I've got to wipe the server completely clean and then switch over to the secure server.
But it also becomes important in things like colleges who have captured lecture and assets that are created by the students, as to I can now just assign and say it's okay for you to use this, and that attributes back scholarly in the chain of command in the way my scholarly attributes work.
Well,
so
the other
that
thing
type of chain of command is really interesting.
That also allows the professor to go back and say whether or not, Michael watched it, Brad watched it, Paul didn't even spend 2 seconds on it, so he gets a 0.
Absolutely.
But that does away with the whole point of anonymity in blockchain.
Yes and no, but
but anonymity isn't the only thing. The whole thing about anonymity is the idea that a lot of people have it, so you can have this record without an identity stand to it. But the technology of being able to have an established chain of custody doesn't necessarily require anonymity, because there are applications that what you're really interested in is what that chain of custody is, and who said you were allowed to see it, and who passed it to you, or various other things. And blockchain is designed to allow that provenance to come along with it, and there's no way to change it without getting a vast conspiracy of every single person who changed it along the way coming in with their private key and doing it.
All right, that'll do it for this month and for this discussion, gentlemen. I thank you so much, Mr. Brad Colt. Thank you, sir. I hope you get unburied from the snow. How do people find you?
Well, thank you for having me, Tim. You can find me on LinkedIn at Brad Colt, KULT. You can follow HGA on Twitter at HGA.
All right, very good, Mr. Drainer. Thank you, sir, as always.
Thank you very much.
How do people find you?
You can find us at drainertech.com, TECH, and follow me on Twitter, Michael Drainer.
All right, very good. Mr. Zealy, it's a pleasure as always, sir. Thank you, sir.
No problem.
How do people find you if they want?
If people should be talking to me, they already know how to get a hold of me.
Oh, come on.
But you can always run through the gauntlet at pro.harmon.com to get to somebody who will get you to me if it's important enough.
All right.
Other than that, my name's Paul Zealy, and you can probably figure out how everything works and goes together, and which is fine because they don't answer my phone or
email for that matter. So yeah, you have to run him down at the trade show and say, come on my show. All right. My name is Tim Albright. Don't follow me, but go by the website if you would, please. AVNation.tv. AVNation.tv. You'll find this program and a host of others. While you are there, please check out our underwriter section. These are the folks that help us financially bring you these programs and programs like AV Week and Resi Week and all the others. So all that and more at AVNation.tv. AVNation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. That is all the time we have for ITAV.